Good morning, everyone. My name is Christy Boyd. I'm a Senior Trustworthy AI Specialist with the SAS Data Ethics Practice, Data and AI Ethics Practice, as we've been recently renamed. I have not had my coffee yet today, so I apologize for a little bit of the shenanigans that you'll have to witness. Hopefully it's entertaining. We are here to talk about SAS AI Navigator Roadmap session. I'm also very entertained because there's a lot of folks sitting kind of by themselves at the table. Feel free to come closer. Feel free to sit together. We don't bite. This is a friendly group. You'll have two presenters today. You'll have myself, again, Christy, and then you'll also have the product manager for Navigator, Ali Deloney, come in and share a lot of the functionality. So we'll be swapping in and out a little bit. We're both members of the data ethics practice under Reggie Townsend, who you saw speak yesterday. So very excited to talk to you about Navigator, the functionality that we'll be providing, the vision for it, the roadmap for it, and what we hope to accomplish with it. It is somewhat funny to do a roadmap session, I will say, because Navigator is still pre-GA. We will be going live in the summer 2026. And so we're doing a roadmap session for a product that will be arriving a little bit later. So that said, take some of the future-facing functionality with a little bit of grain of salt, safe harbor, make sure you're making purchasing decisions based on functionality that's already available, not necessarily everything that's being presented in this session. And apparently we have animations on this slide. See if we can keep it in place. So SAS AI Navigator is a new software as a service product that SAS is going to be making available this summer, like I mentioned. And it's really designed for the executive, but useful enough for your legal team, for your data scientist, for all of the other individuals who participate in AI governance within your organization. Our goal with Navigator, I'm going to be fighting the slides, aren't I, today? Let's see. Is there a way for us to stop the auto advance? Let's see if this works. The goal of Navigator really is to provide a holistic approach to aggregating and orchestrating and governing all of your models, agents, and use cases. So all of the key components that enable you as an organization to leverage artificial intelligence, we want to be able to have in a centralized location so that you can actually comment on, and you can easily see and govern where the documentation is. You can easily see what the status of your assessments is. Thank you so much. And you can also identify any alerts that are showing up. Now, how many of you were in the main session yesterday? Raise your hand. A good number of folks, okay. Has anybody gotten a chance to try Navigator in the try zone or see it at the booth yet? No? Okay. So I just wanted to get a sense of how familiar we are with the product. Thank you. Navigator itself started as somewhat a selfish product for SAS. Here's what I mean by that. A few years ago, we realized that we are providing a lot of artificial intelligence, and we are using a lot of artificial intelligence ourselves, and we needed a way to scale that usage. We needed a way to scale our governance of that usage. And so Reggie and I started having some internal conversations about how are we going to govern artificial intelligence? We need a product for this. We need a tool for this. And so we started doing some thinking, doing some designing, and we realized that a lot of our customers were having similar conversations and we're having the same experience. If we're going to start using more AI, we have strategies for AI implementations, pilots in place, we need a tool to govern this. And that's really the foundation of where Navigator came out to be. So you'll see a lot of the features here that I'm going to talk to you about and that Ali is going to showcase are really representative of the needs that we've had internally and also the needs that we know a lot of our customers have had as well. So let me showcase a little bit. You've already seen this slide pop up a few times, but these are the key components for Navigator. There's really 6-ish, if you will, objects that make up Navigator and enable the governance structure. You have your use cases, the business purpose of AI. What problem are you actually trying to solve with artificial intelligence? You have your models, probably the most straightforward one of them all, right? The actual kind of technology enabling what you're doing with AI, the agents as well. That's the buzzword of the year for all of us, I think. And also your policies, your standards. What are the external regulations that you have to adhere to and the internal standards, procedures that you have in place as well. We'll talk about assessments as well and how assessments tie together the actions that you need to take on a model, on a use case, on an agent, and the alerts that pop up. Now, what's interesting, I think, about a lot of these definitions is that The words are familiar to all of us. I think all of you have heard them before, you've used them before, but they're all defined a little bit differently across the organizations. So I want to make sure we're using consistent language, and to do that, I'm going to bring Ali Deloney to be able to walk us through what each one of these means. Thank you. Ali?
Thank you, Christy. So, to Christy's point, I've even spoken with some folks over the past few days at the AI Navigator booth, and we've had some conversations about what use cases are to them, what models are to them, and discussing how they're interconnected. So I think it's definitely important to just give everybody a high-level definition of what each of these things actually are. So starting out with the use case, as Christy was saying, this is really the primary governance entity in AI Navigator. And the idea is that this is really the business problem that you are looking to solve. At the use case level, there's sort of nothing to do with technology at this point in time. So let me walk through a specific example, and I'm going to carry this example through all of the slides just to give you a better sense of how all of these things relate to one another. So let's say that we have an automated resume screening process. Let's say I'm getting hundreds of applications as an HR manager, and I'm just absolutely inundated, not knowing if any of them were submitted from a bot, how many of them are actually human-generated resumes and applications. And so I really need some help to be able to get through all of those applications. So my hope is that I can see if there are additional technologies at my organization that can help me make this process a bit easier. So again, the use case for that would be an automated resume scheduler, essentially, or an automated resume screening process. And as you'll notice, I didn't mention anything about the technology. And it's really important because it's the models and the agents themselves that power each of our use cases. So with that, I'm going to go and then talk about models. So models are one of the things in AI Navigator that will power our use case. So let's go back and think about our automated resume screening use case for a moment and think about some models that could support that. So let's say that I have a model that creates a score that tells me the likelihood for a candidate's success at the organization based on the characteristics in their resume. That's a pretty classic machine learning model. We've been creating logistic regression models for the past, 50 years or so. And we support registering those in AI Navigator. It also could be a large language model that processes through a resume and then checks to see if the skills in the resume align with the skills on the actual job description. So there's two different examples of the actual pieces of technology that ultimately power the use case.
Now, Ali, question for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
Would you consider ChatGPT a model in Navigator?
That is a fantastic question. So just to repeat the question, Christy asked whether ChatGPT is a model. So in fact, I would argue that no, ChatGPT is not a model because ChatGPT is actually a UI that sits on a set of models, and it provides an interface for users to interact with the models under the surface. It also provides some memory capabilities and also some additional connection capabilities. So in my opinion, and based on the definition that we use for AI Navigator, ChatGPT in this case would actually be an agent. So now let's talk a little bit about the difference between a model and an agent. So with a model, the idea is that you have a set of inputs and then you have a set of outputs. It's pretty simple. With an agent, however, an agent will take action on your behalf. Now, of course, an agent could also contain deterministic models, logistic regression models, for example, but the idea is that they are taking action on your behalf. So to go back to our resume screening use case one more time, let's now consider that the two models that we spoke about are actually embedded into an agent. So let's say that I have decided as the HR manager to implement an agent wherein it scans through all of the applications and it identifies candidates that have a score of 50% or higher for success, and it automatically screens out everybody with a score lower than 50%. And then the next step might be that now it's the LLM's turn to come in. And at this point in time, it would do that comparison to see if there's a skills match between the application and the job description. And then it could also throw away any applications where there isn't a match at all. And then all of a sudden you go from 500 applications to maybe 50. Now, of course, we need to be very careful with the governance of agents because of this, because agents are making decisions on our behalf. We of course know the logic that the models are using to ultimately get to that final decision point, but it's because they are taking action on our behalf that we need to make sure that we are providing additional governance to our agents. So next I want to talk about policies for a little bit. So a policy is either an external regulation or an internal standard that you would apply to your use case. And the idea is in AI Navigator, the policy being applied to the use case is critical because it's possible, going back to our large language model example for a moment, that single large language model could be used in 10 different use cases. And the risk associated with each of those use cases may be drastically different. So I'm all about examples today, apparently. So to give you another example, let's take a facial recognition model. So we could use that model to create a very cute dog Snapchat filter, right? It detects your face and it puts cute little ears on you whenever you open your mouth, like the tongue sticks out. The use case is pretty low risk. However, you could also use a facial recognition model to check passengers in at the airport so they can get through security. As you might imagine, the risk of those two separate use cases are very different. The policies that you apply to those use cases are also quite different. And that's why policies at the use case level here are so critical. Now, the way that we actually operationalize policies is whenever you apply a policy to a use case in AI Navigator, there's a set of questions that comes along with that policy. So let's think about the EU AI Act for a moment. Let's say there are 300 questions that you have to answer in order to comply with the EU AI Act. So when you apply the EU AI Act policy to your use case, then you automatically have those questions available to you, and then all of those can be answered by the appropriate stakeholders in your organization. And we have the appropriate approval workflows and auditing processes so you can see who did what and when they did it. And then the last thing that I want to point out is we also have governance alerts, because none of us are perfect, and it's certainly the case that maybe we forgot to add a certain piece of metadata when we were documenting the model in AI Navigator, or maybe we forgot to apply a risk classification to our use case once we applied a policy. So the governance alerts are really meant to help support you so that you can get to a final state of being healthy from an AI governance perspective. So now that I've walked through a lot of the the primary components of AI Navigator, I'm going to bring Christy back up on the stage, and I'm going to have her talk to you a little bit more about timelines and what you can expect moving forward with AI Navigator. Thanks.
Thanks, Allie. So I think it's important, and this was important for us to do, because like we talked earlier, folks define use cases differently. Folks have different definitions for models. What I will call out to is that while those are the definitions that we apply for Navigator, Navigator is very flexible. So if within your organization you have a little bit of a different approach of defining things, you would still be able to apply those within Navigator and be able to leverage the product. When can you actually leverage it? So let's talk about the statuses of where we are. We just completed a limited preview with 2 customers that participated, and the work really there was kind of pre-development, during development, getting feedback, making sure that we're not developing the product in a silo, but we're getting feedback from our customers in the public sector and also customers kind of from the more commercial side of things, if you will. So that is completed. We are now obviously at Innovate 2026, so very excited to be talking about Navigator, announcing a lot of the capabilities and having a lot of sessions on the topic. Soon after Innovate, we will be kicking off a private preview that I would love to invite all of you into. We're calling it a private preview for some legal and technical reasons, but it is fairly open as long as you're a SaaS customer currently, and there's a couple technical call-outs I can make separately. We would love to have you participate. It's going to start within the next month or so and run until the GA date. So for about a month and a half or so, you'll be able to access the environment for free. And the only ask we have is that you provide us some feedback, some thoughts, some ideas, what things are working, what things are lacking, what things you would want to see in a post-GA release, follow functionality, etc. We really want to make sure that Navigator at GA has had a lot of back and forth, has been designed and kind of developed, if you will, with feedback from all of you. So make sure that you join the private preview itself. And there's more information about that I'll share in a few slides as well. We'll move into general availability in the summer. And at that point, we'll be post-GA. We'll have other feature releases coming up. Now, if you want to learn more about Navigate, AI Navigator at Innovate, we have a variety of sessions. Obviously, you saw main stage. We're having this talk. We're having this conversation right now. There will be a spotlight later today at 11 o'clock by Ali and one of our partners, Protiviti, where they're going to really dive deep under the hood of a policy. What does it look like to have policies? How do the assessments work, et cetera? I'll call out, too, that within Navigator, policy is a very important component for making sure that you actually have your governance structures in place. And so I think that's a session I would definitely invite you to be at. And it's in the main hub right before lunch. What's a better place to be? We also have some follow-up sessions later for the SaaS AI Navigator governing AI code assistance in production, and that will be a super demo for any of you who have developers in your organization that might be using various agents to code, using various kind of AI coding assistants, if you will. I think this would be a really good session to see kind of on our experience, what are some of the best practices and techniques that you can use for governance, and also how Navigator can assist you in that. If these sessions don't work for your agenda, we do have the Innovation Hub, and there's a booth in the Innovation Hub that either Ali or I or a couple of our colleagues are always at, and we're happy to do demos, we're happy to do kind of more hands-on conversations as well. And if you're tactile, if you want to actually play with the product itself, we do have it available in the Tri-Zone. So raise your hand if you've been in the Tri-Zone at all, not for Navigator, but just in general. Raise your hand if you've been to the Tri-Zone. 2 hands. Okay. So the Tri-Zone, if you haven't heard about it yet, closer to the back of the hub, but it's a great opportunity to actually get your hands on, I think there's 12 to 16 products, last I heard, that SaaS has. You can go in, they have it set up where you can actually test out. I think DataMaker's in there. I think some of our Copilots are in there, and Navigator is as well. So all the technology that you're hearing about in the sessions and the main stage, a lot of it is available on a laptop set up for you to actually kind of experience and get a little bit more tactile with itself. So make sure you try that as well. I think there's 6 laptops. There's quite enough room for all of us there. Now, post-Innovate, like I said, we're going to have the private preview available. The preview is going to include most of the GA capabilities, right? So the things that Ali has just talked about, the models, the agents. You'll have your policies in place. You'll have the ability to add in your users, kind of start up that governance. There will be some work done, obviously, post-preview. There might be some changes with GA, but it'll be close to GA functionality. And like I said, it's really an opportunity for us to get your feedback, right, on the product and things that we need to include in the roadmap. And it's an opportunity for you as well to be able to kind of experience the product if you're in an organization that has a longer kind of procurement cycle, if you will, or if you have folks that you need to really convince to use Navigator, or if you need some convincing yourself, this would be a really good opportunity. It's a completely free environment, like I said, for about a month and a half. We would just ask that you kindly provide some feedback and kind of engage with us. Don't just ghost us as you get that preview. So follow the QR code to sign up. If you missed the QR code, also come find us in the booth. We'd be happy to sign you up as well and kind of give you the information. I should clarify, because somebody was very worried about it yesterday, scanning the QR code does not sign you up for the preview. It just gets you to the page where you can express interest, and then once more details are available about the actual date of the start of the preview, what does that technical enablement look like, we will email all of that to you, and we'll send that to you based on your interest, and then you can opt in or out, right? So this is not a deep commitment. This is just the save the date, if you will. Let's see. So this will be available globally as well, right? So there's no limitation on where in the globe you can be located. It will be, I believe, supporting a number of languages, not just English, correct? Correct. So if your organization uses a language that's not English, another language for business operations, come talk to us and we can see if that language is supported as well. But again, we really want to have some global participation involved in the preview. Post-preview. Once you get the product, once we have your feedback, summer 2026, about midsummer or so, we're going to have the product available for consumption for purchasing via Azure Marketplace. So Navigator, like I mentioned, is a software as a service product, right? There will not be on-prem for GA. We do not plan to have an on-prem kind of use case at this point, but we would love to hear if that's something that you're concerned about. But you'll be able to get this on Azure Marketplace. It's a very quick implementation. I want to call this out because there's no compute in Navigator. It's a very light solution. And from the moment you say, I want the product, to the moment you're actually in the product and experiencing it, assuming that you don't have extremely long procurement cycles yourself, it should be a very, very quick, max couple of hours, couple of days, this conversation we're having. So that is GA, that is the summer. Hopefully at that point you would have been in the product for the private preview, so you've experienced it as well, and you'll be very bought in and excited into it. Post-GA, what do we actually plan to have? So obviously, I think we've beaten the dead horse at this point about the different asset types that we have, but you'll have your kind of landing page governance dashboard. The functionality that you saw yesterday on main stage that Reggie and I were demoing, that will be available at GA. So that executive view, that quick answer to the question of how are we actually doing in terms of AI governance will be available at GA. The ability for you to actually manage the various assets, agents, models, et cetera, pull them into Navigator will all be also available out of the box, as well as the ability for you to add and customize some of the policies and assessment questions that you need, connecting the two together to each other. Of course, we'll have a variety of notification and alerting set up so that you know when things are going wrong, when things are going well, and also flag any work that needs to be done. And it goes without saying, but I'll call it out anyway, there'll be an admin experience for you to be able to actually manage that interface. So that's the GA. Obviously, there's a lot more that we want to do. There's a lot more that we will be doing. So again, I'll call out Safe Harbor, make all purchasing decisions based on functionality that is currently available and not necessarily what's been presented in this session right now. But we plan to have connections. Connections is functionality that makes it more automated, if you will, automagical, to actually include your assets within Navigator, right? So we're hoping to gain some of your own feedback to understand what are the systems of record that you're currently using to track your AI models, right? Are you using Vertex? Are you using something else? And we want to know that information. We want to know, what are your legal teams using? Is it Excel spreadsheets? Is it ServiceNow? What are the systems of record that you have that we can make it easier to actually centralize within Navigator, right, and build out that connection functionality? So that's one of the features that we will be asking questions about during the preview as well. We will also be looking at adding functionality called tasks, and that will be the ability for you to actually assign a task for somebody. Let's say that's an alert, there's an assessment, somebody in sales has decided that it's a good idea to add in an agent for account management. I'm making things up, I have not had my coffee, but bear with me, right? You can actually assign a task to them and say, I need additional due diligence, I need a business justification for this, I need some additional work completed before that can move on further. So we're looking at adding that functionality as well as comments. So more of that kind of social, if you will, piece towards Navigator. Again, roadmap, just things we're considering, but this is something we'll be looking for feedback during the private preview. In the future, we have a lot of ideas. We're only showing 4 on this slide, but there's, as you can imagine, dozens and dozens and dozens of features that we want to recommend and want to build into the product. Some of the ones that we're calling out is the ability to actually create fully custom workflows and alerts, right? How much customization can we make it happen? How much customization is helpful? How much customization is too much customization is one of the things that we're really trying to understand right now in the conversations with our customers. We're looking at Copilot's integration. Obviously, you heard SAS investing a lot into kind of the agentic flows, is investing a lot into Copilot capabilities. What are the Copilots that would be helpful to put into your governance structures that can help automate some of the processes or can help simplify some of the processes? We're looking at that as a post V2, V3, if you will. And then, of course, we're looking at some of the more automated detection of assets, really going in and automatically detecting that shadow AI that might be hiding in your organizations. We'll also, I'll call this out, currently in the process of getting the various certifications, right? Looking at the WAGs, looking at all the ISO standards, looking at all the other 3-letter, 4-letter acronyms, if you will. Many of them will not be available at GA, but we are on the roadmap. So if you have specific requirements for certifications for products, come talk to us. We'll be happy to tell you what's in the works, what we got planned. So we really wanted to keep our part of the conversation short because this is a roadmap session for a product that's still pre-GA, which again to me is just very ironic to do. And we wanted to reserve a lot of time for any questions that you all might have on Navigator, on the roadmap, on the functionality that I've covered so far. So I'm going to stop blabbering and I'm going to take a breath, and I would love to hear any questions that you guys have. And I think we have a mic over here that Russ is going to be running for us.
Can you talk about the connection in the next? So does AI Navigator connect to SAS datasets?
Sorry, say it again?
Does AI Navigator read SAS datasets?
That's a great question. Do you want to take it? So I'm going to bring in Ali to help with the product side of things too.
So at the moment, AI Navigator does not directly connect to any data at all. And I want to be clear about the purpose of that. We really wanted to make sure that this is primarily for governance purposes. So certainly from a security perspective, that was something that we were concerned about. AI Navigator does provide an area for you to document information about your data governance processes, however. But specifically as it relates to connections and what we're looking to do in the future is we're hoping to connect AI Navigator to your existing modeling platforms so that it's much easier to simply pull over all of your models that are in an existing repository so that they're all being tracked and managed within AI Navigator.
I'll call out something too explicitly. So Navigator does not create redundancy in your organization. We're not going to copy your data sets and store them in Navigator. We're not copying the models and storing them in Navigator, right? That would be redundancy. That would also be very heavy from a kind of an architecture standpoint. Navigator really is your resource and your hub for all the metadata. So we have all the information around the data sets. We'll have all the information around the models that you're using without moving that from your source of record into Navigator. And to Ali's point, the purpose of that is really addressing that executive concern. Your executives don't particularly care to see all the nuts and the bolts, if you will, of the data in the model, but they want to know just the right amount of information, and they want to know how to get to the full in-depth information if they're more technical, right? So that's what Navigator is really doing. It's going to be a very light product by design so that it can be more focused on that executive persona with all the linking, with all the capabilities to kind of spider out, if you will, and network out to all your sources of record currently.
Can Navigator connect to external model, like a non-SAS model?
I'm so happy you asked that question. Are you sure you're not a plant in the audience? So that is something that we wanted to make sure to be very clear about, is that AI Navigator is able to manage every single kind of model. They do not have to be SAS models. They can be any other kind of model that was built internally. It can also be any large language model or agent that you've acquired externally. The goal is that you have a single product to look into, especially for your executives, to answer the question, where is AI being used at my organization? Even if one of my departments is using Model Manager, and another department might be using Databricks, and another department might be using R to develop their models. The goal is we understand that different teams, even within the same organization, use different tools. So the goal is that AI Navigator will be that single place for you to see where all of your models are being used.
I had a question in regards to alerts. Can you do a little bit more details on what these alerts would actually represent?
Yeah, absolutely. So many of the alerts that have been added into the product are meant to fire when you have approved a use case, but there's missing information. So let's say that we've applied a policy to a use case and there are 10 required questions. If you decide to then deploy that use case and or set that use case as approved, at that point in time is when you're going to get an alert because it's letting you know that, hey, you approved this use case, you probably shouldn't have because you haven't filled out all of the appropriate information that's required to fully answer it. And it's possible that you've actually done the work already, it just hasn't been documented in there. With that said, we did want to be really careful to not overwhelm people with alert fatigue with this. So the idea was that we only want to alert folks when they have decided to approve a use case or deploy a use case so that they can go and act on that specifically. The other thing that I'll mention, and this was actually showcased on the main stage yesterday, is we have this area on our landing page called governance risks. And I don't know if maybe we could like pull that up quickly. Do you want to find that slide? It's like the third slide, I want to say. So if you decide that there's a problem with one of the models being used in your organization, again, take the example from yesterday, there was a specific data injection attack with your model. And you happen to know that that model is being used across 10 separate use cases at your organization. If you go into the model itself, you can set the approval status as, or I'm sorry, the usage authorization specifically as prohibited. And the moment that you do that, there's going to be a tile that appears here to let you know that this is a governance risk for you. Because now you have a model that is technically not allowed to be used, even just temporarily, and there are 10 use cases that are being impacted by this. So the other thing that I will say, speaking with folks that have been able to see the product so far, they've requested the ability to have customized alerts. So that's another thing that we're considering in the future as well, because I guarantee you that we've not thought of every single possible governance alert, not to mention you may want very, very specific alerts added into AI Navigator to alert you when certain things occur.
Yeah, you mentioned the EU framework policy. Is there a similar comparison of one in the United States?
So the way that I'll answer that question is thinking more around how AI Navigator manages our policies. So we've decided to work with a handful of partners to help support us for them to develop policies wherein they do the interpretation of existing regulations so that they can actually be operationalized. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to read an AI regulation before, but it's not very fun. And a single lawyer, you could give them, well, you could give two separate lawyers a single paragraph, and they would very likely interpret that same paragraph differently. So what we're trying to do with policies is to make this process much more simple for you and get all of the regulation text translated into easy to understand and answer questions. To your point about, is there a regulation in the US? We have a lot of standards and guidelines that we recommend that folks use, to my knowledge at this point in time, other than some like state-specific AI policies. A lot of the US-based policies are really standards and regulation, or standards specifically and recommendations. But the idea is that in AI Navigator, we support both internal policies. So if you have standards that you've already created within your organization, all you have to do is get it into our format, so it's in that questions format, And now you can start to use that on the use cases as well, in addition to any regulation-driven policies as well.
I'll add a little bit of color too. So the EUAI Act, you'll hear people mention a lot because it's kind of the first comprehensive regulatory kind of framework, if you will. That's still being translated into a lot of the country by country interpretations, if you will. There's other regulatory standards, the Korea Basic Act, for example. I know Brazil and Canada have a variety of rules and laws as well that are being passed currently. The U.S. has taken more of a state-by-state approach. I'm not a lawyer, just play one on TV, but that tends to be the approach that the U.S. has taken. And that's one of the reasons why a governance framework is super essential right now, because if you're operating in more than one state, right, you're now going to be having to deal with all the state-by-state differentiation in the various regulations that are applicable. And some of the laws are not bound by the geographical locations of the state, right, or the entity. The EUAI Act has an extraterritorial application as well. And so in Navigator, we're designing it to be flexible enough to where you can have all that variety of regulations tracked in the system as well. There was 2 hands I saw pop up over here somewhere, I think. Oh, the policies are very flexible. The functionality really is designed to help support a lot of the permutations that you will have to adhere to and us as a company have to adhere to as well. We will have partners available too. If you in your organization, you're looking at all the regulatory landscape and you're saying we're overwhelmed, we need help. That'll be something that we have partners kind of on deck ready to support and provide some guidance. And then a number of legal departments within customers I've talked to already have some of those frameworks in place. But I'm glad we were able to read your mind ahead of time. There's a hand right over here, sir.
Thank you. So we use SAS MRM to govern AI use cases in our organization. Had you considered integrating this with that, or do you see that as being quite they're distinct kind of use cases?
That's a great question. So SAS MRM, for those that are not familiar, is a model risk management tool that's very popular and very robust, specifically in the financial sector, insurance companies. I'm guessing you're in that kind of banking domain, insurance world. I see you nodding. So we have considered it. We actually have a product that's integrated directly with MRM called AI Governance Manager that connects some of that VIA capability within Model Manager into the robustness of the MRM world requires that is available for that sector. The reason we still have Navigator as a separate product is because there's really a different standard of due diligence that tends to go through for companies that don't have full-on model risk management departments, right, or risk management departments to that extent. The MRM functionality can be a lot, right, and we want to make sure governance is irresistible. We want to make sure governance is easier enough to do, if you will. And so that's why for financial sector, we have folks I can connect you. I think I saw Chris somewhere in the background. I can connect you around the governance manager functionality if you have MRM. And if you're looking for something much more lightweight and not tied to the financial sector, that will be Navigator. Yeah.
I think to that point, so with the connections functionality that we're looking to develop, one of the things that we are looking to do is to connect AI Navigator to MRM, because in our perspective, it's not either you use MRM or you use AI Navigator. It's theoretically you would be using both, because you're going to be using MRM for all of your models that you're currently using that need that due diligence. But there are likely going to be other models that you're using at your organization that don't need that same level of due diligence. But you still may want to have AI Navigator as the single place where you can go to see all of the models. So one of the connections that we're hoping to also make is between AI Navigator and MRM, just so that we can suck in the appropriate information about those models so that we can get that information all in one place.
So the AI model and agents, right, it's spread out across all different platforms in your company. So underlying assumption is that there is the agent repository available, or it searches through all the platforms?
Just to repeat the question, make sure I heard it correctly, you're saying is the assumption that the models and the agents are spread out across a lot of different platforms? Is the assumption that it's all
Right.
centralized, or if it's still kind of distributed across the board?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Navigator, I think both are valid use cases, right? Our goal is to help you centralize everything so we can act as that source of truth. We understand that there's some models over here, there's some models over there, most typically in an organization. If you have it centralized, if you have a single spreadsheet or Word doc or whatever it may be, right, that has all those use cases, obviously we can support that. But you can also use Navigator to actually go through the due diligence process of saying, we have 6 models here, IT has 7 over here, let's put that information into Navigator. Do you want to add?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the idea is where AI Navigator would not be coming in to change your existing processes at all. The idea is it's fine if your models are over here and your agents are over here, because AI Navigator is meant to be the place that you go to govern all of those things, and it's meant to work alongside with the processes that you're already using. And to that point, we also understand that not every single approval is going to likely take place in AI Navigator, because you all probably have existing approval processes in place for your legal folks to review the content, for your security folks to review the content that might be in ServiceNow or in Jira or in other places. And again, we're not hoping to replace that. We're hoping to be a single point of truth that then links out to where all of those things exist, so that you know where everything is located. And that is the same case for models and agents as well. You would include the location of where they exist, but you wouldn't necessarily have to change anything about your existing architecture.
Awesome. Well, I know the sessions are very close to each other, so we want to give you a few minutes to get to your next appointment, if you will. I'll pull up the private preview QR code again if you missed that. Please do make sure to join and sign up. And later today, we have a couple of different sessions available that we would love to see at the Spotlight session, the Navigator Governing AI Code Assistant session later in the day. And if those don't work, come find us in the hub. We'd love to talk more about Navigator. Thank you all for being here.